Hello, and welcome to the latest installment of Law & Order, the video series where I look at and unpack stories from games. In this one, we'll be diving into the first Souls game on the channel, and that game is Neowiz Games and Round 8 Studios' 2023 title, Lies of P. This game was based around Carlo Collodi's 1883 novel The Adventures of Pinocchio, which is set in Tuscany, Italy, and is about a puppet named Pinocchio and his creator, and the man he sees as his father, Geppetto. However, the game is set pretty loosely around this novel. The game's design was based on the Belle Epoque period, which translates as the Beautiful Era, and which took place between 1871 and 1914, and was an era which saw European civilization grow in power. For the gameplay, as with any Souls game, it's known for its difficulty. No difficulty setting, just you, a tough boss, a learning curve, and plenty of punishment. The bosses were pretty cool at first, but seemed to get pretty poor towards the late stage of the game, but that is just my own opinion, of course. In this video, we'll be looking at the plot in its most basic form and then unpacking certain parts of the story afterwards. Finally, please note that there will be spoilers in this video for Lies of P, but with all that out of the way, let's begin. A puppet named P sits in a chair on an abandoned train carriage in the fictional city of Krat. He hears the voice of a woman who introduces herself as Sophia, telling him that he needs to go to a nearby hotel, the aptly named Hotel Krat. P also finds a light on the floor. Picking it up, it says that Gemini will restart soon. Gemini is to escort P to the hotel. Picking his choice of weapon, P ventures out onto the platform. True to what Sophia said, the streets of Krat are not safe. Progressing through Krat Central Station, it seems that contrary to their design, the puppets are frenzied as a result of a phenomenon known as the puppet frenzy, and will attack anything on sight, and therefore have massacred the population of Krat. Moving through the streets, fighting frenzied puppets and getting close to the hotel, P encounters his first obstacle in the form of the Parade Master, a huge hulking puppet that was built and designed as a way to entertain the crowds, and was built in celebration of something called the Grand Exhibition. More on that later. The Parade Master, like the other puppets, is hostile, and as he's blocking the entrance to the hotel, P battles the puppet and defeats him. Moving on, P approaches Hotel Krat. Now, puppets are not allowed entry to the hotel, so P is asked a simple question. Is he human? If he says that he's a puppet, then he isn't able to gain entry. P can also lie and say he's human, and this is a very important decision that will change the course of P's destiny. P enters the hotel. The hotel itself used to be an ancient castle. The castle was at one point turned into a mental hospital and a rehabilitation facility. It was purchased by a very wealthy woman, was renovated, and then subsequently turned into a hotel. Inside, P meets with Sophia. She tells P that she has searched all over the city of Krat in order to find him. She tells him that although he has questions, Giuseppe Geppetto will have the answers to those questions, but his current whereabouts are unknown, with his last known location being one of the scariest neighborhoods in Krat. P also meets with the others there in the hotel. The owner of the hotel, Antonia, who is coughing in a wheelchair and is very sick, suffering from a mysterious disease called the Petrification Disease, and this disease has already ravaged the city of Krat, killing many. P also meets Antonia's puppet butler Polendina and a weaponsmith named Eugenie, who can provide P with some pretty cool upgrades, which of course will help P battle his way through the streets of Krat. Leaving the hotel, Gemini warns P about a group called the Black Rabbit Brotherhood. Nonetheless, P has made it to the entrance to Elysium Boulevard. Heading through the streets of Elysium Boulevard, which was once bustling with the wealthy people of Krat, P finds more frenzied puppets. Coming to the Alchemists bridge, P comes across a grisly sight. A puppet has been hung from the bridge, and a notice on it says, "Purge Puppets." Crossing the bridge, P hears a man shouting for Geppetto to come out as he has a lot to answer for, that he knows exactly why the puppet frenzy happened, as Geppetto made the puppets, that he and a group called the Alchemists were scheming together. Seeing P, the man known as the Mad Donkey, is filled with rage and fights him. P defeats the hostile human and saves Geppetto. Geppetto addresses P as son and says he understands why people are annoyed at him. He says that he needs to take care of the frenzied puppets at City Hall and asks for P's help in doing so. Geppetto, meanwhile, will go back to Hotel Krat. Pushing on, P arrives at City Hall and walks inside. He's confronted by the Scrapped Watchman. The Scrapped Watchman is another massive creation, a puppet known as Murphy, who was designed to guard the courtyard but also entertained and was friends with the children of Krat. His friends and the children were killed in the frenzy, and he's there to get revenge on their behalf. Again, this puppet is ferocious, but P manages to defeat him. Heading back to Hotel Krat, P speaks with Geppetto, who has set up a workshop in one of the hotel's upper rooms. He mentions a puppet factory beyond Elysium Boulevard, and there's a man, an inventor, trapped there named Vanini. Geppetto needs P to save Vanini and to shut down the factory. Heading out once again, P heads into the factory, and making his way through it and fighting off more puppets, he comes across a mysterious pair, the Red Fox and the Black Cat, who are a pair of what's called Stalkers. They refer to P as a stalker, and say that him getting there in one piece is impressive. They speak of this benefiting their former client, who was Vanini himself. They wish P luck. P eventually finds Vanini. He's hiding and initially thinks that P is going to kill him. Realizing that P is not hostile, Vanini says that he needs help finding his butler Pulcinella. He says that the Stalkers were meant to be working for him, but they abandoned him and the factory. Pulcinella went to barricade the back door, but has not returned. So P heads for the back door, and he encounters Fuoco, the King's Flame. He's guarding the doorway. He's been the one keeping the factory running and has been creating more puppets. Endless reinforcements, if you will. As you'd imagine, Fuoco uses fire as one of his many forms of offense, but after a tough fight, P takes Fuoco down. After defeating Fuoco, Vanini and Pulcinella are back at Hotel Krat and are safe. P's next task is to head to the St. Frangelico Cathedral to save its Archbishop Andreas, who was instrumental in the cathedral having taken in so many refugees when the puppet frenzy started. P also learns that the puppets are taking orders and are following the Puppet King. With the factory now shut down, P pushes on and leaves the factory through the back doors. After a jaunt through the mine, P comes to a small town called Moonlight Town. P arrives at a cable car and speaks with someone known as the Atoned. She warns him that the cathedral is not the sanctuary it once was, and that people who went up there never returned. Therefore, the cathedral is off limits, forever. She does, however, say that if he wishes to pass, he must confirm his identity. She asks P a simple question. Is he a stalker? If he does nothing, then he must fight the Atoned, and after this he obtains the key for the cable car and is free to ascend. If he answers yes by giving the Stalkers greeting, the Atoned is intrigued, saying that she thought the Stalkers all died in something called the Battle of the Workshop Tower. She then gives him the key to the cable railway. Having ascended, he spots something, a former human, a carcass. There are many and they are very hostile. Fighting his way through the carcasses, P arrives at the cathedral. He speaks with a man named Giangio. He's an alchemist. He was fearful for his life for a moment as he believed that P was from the organization. He explains that he's looking for the legendary gold coin fruit, as he believes it contains the cure for the Petrification Disease, as he has the disease himself. He asks P to let him know if he manages to find it. Fighting through many more carcasses and moving deeper into the cathedral, P sees something in there. He meets Cecile, a nun, who says that she serves the Archbishop, but that she's the only one left, with the others having died from either the Petrification Disease or from the monsters. She asks P to bring her the Holy Mark from the Archbishop's quarters. P can choose whether or not to help Cecile out. If he does, returning to her, she thanks him, but later on, it seems that she's disappeared. She'd left a confession stating that she'd murdered people in the past, and that she is a monster. P meets a strange fellow too, going by the name of Alidoro the Hound. He's a treasure hunter. He asks if P knows of a safe place, and here P has another choice, whether to lie or to tell the truth. If he tells the truth, Alidoro will make the journey to the safety of Hotel Krat. The weaponsmith Eugenie seems to have a close relationship with Alidoro, and she's glad that he's safe. She says that despite having lost most of her memories from her past, she remembers that Alidoro actually saved her life once. Moving on, P enters a large room and encounters the monster that he saw earlier and that he's heard about. This is the mutated form of the Archbishop Andreas, the once highly respected and influential priest. He was so respected that people even thought that he could well have been St. Frangelico himself. They called him the Saint of Krat. This gargantuan grotesque mess of flesh is a tough enemy for sure, but eventually P manages to give the Archbishop his rest and puts him down. After defeating him though, something happens. The Ergo that was laying inside the puppets that P had defeated, the Archbishop, Fuoco, the Parade Master and the Scrapped Watchman, is being extracted and is being collected via a contraption in a large tower. A mysterious man sits there saying the stage is set, and he then starts laughing to himself. Heading back to the hotel and speaking with Vanini, he gives P something he's created called an Ergo wavelength decoder. Created for the purpose of finding error in the puppet's imprint, this device allows him to decipher the ergo wavelengths of the frenzied puppets as he wants to work out what's making them so aggressive. P needs to head to the Malum district and leaves the cathedral. In order to get to the Malum district, P must travel via the Path of the Pilgrim. It's a very dangerous path to walk, with many beasts and carcasses blocking the way, including a massively mutated carcass in the slums. But after defeating them all, he comes to a bridge and is addressed by someone inside a fortress. They say that they have an intruder, P, so they send another huge carcass after him. Unfortunately for them, P easily defeats it and heads into the fortress. Inside, he hears the voice again, and this time the person says that a nasty puppet has invaded their territory and for the people in the district to be careful. Walking the streets of the Malum district, P comes into contact with the Red Fox and the Black Cat again. They are, again, impressed by P surviving his battle with Fuoco. They want to team up, and P can choose whether or not to accept. Whatever he chooses, he fights his way through the rain-soaked streets, and eventually comes to another large, open area. P is confronted by the Black Rabbit Brotherhood. They are wanted due to various crimes such as stealing bodies, and they've taken over the Malum district after the Battle of the Workshop Tower, and have been terrorizing and exploiting the neighborhood, offering their protection services from carcasses and puppets. After catching people on their territory or interfering with their business, they throw them in what's called the Liar's Coffin. Fighting them, the only one that really matters is the older brother, and after taking him out, the other Black Rabbits are distraught and decide to walk away but state their desire for revenge at some point in the future. Heading into the town hall, P spots a portrait that looks exactly like himself. Grabbing the portrait, P sees Giangio again. He says that he found the gold coin tree, but that he couldn't pick the fruit off said tree as it has actually burnt his hand. Opening the door, it's revealed that the gold coin tree has been in the grounds of Hotel Krat the entire time. Speaking with Geppetto and giving him the portrait from the town hall, he's taken aback by it, saying that the Black Rabbit Brotherhood has stolen it. Geppetto tells P to go to Rosa Isabel Street, which apparently was the epicenter of the puppet frenzy. P needs to go there and take down the King of Puppets, as then, hopefully, the puppets will become confused and leaderless. Grabbing the key from Antonia, P heads to Rosa Isabel Street. P learns about Adelina Corday, a legendary singer who regularly performed there as the singer in the red dress, as the place was the arts and entertainment district. He later, after fighting through the puppet-filled streets, comes across Adelina's sister Patricia, a stalker who goes by the name The White Lady. She's convinced that Adelina is dead, killed by puppets, and that she needs to avenge her, so P fights her and is forced to kill her. After this, he comes across Julian the Gentleman, who, it appears, was the first person to marry a puppet. P can choose to help Julian by retrieving a wedding ring from his wife Melody's body. Finding her body and returning the item, P has a choice to make, as Julian asks him if puppets are capable of love. He can lie and say that she left him a message saying she loves him, or he can say that puppets are not capable of loving a human. Either way, P presses on, fighting through more frenzied puppets and fighting absolute douchebags such as the Mad Clown Puppet. P gains entry to the Estella Opera House. Fighting his way through the Opera House, P can come across Adelina in her dressing room, hiding and very much alive, but infected with the Petrification Disease. The disease has caused her to lose her voice, and she asks P to find her some fruit. He then returns with an apple, and she confesses that her sister actually had a better voice than her, so she poisoned her. Her locket shows a deep hatred and jealousy towards her sister, with the picture inside the locket appearing to have been slashed. Leaving her to succumb to the disease, P then pushes forward and enters a large set of doors. Something has been set up for P's arrival. It shows an old man who looks remarkably like Geppetto, taking the mechanical heart out of a puppet that looks remarkably like P and walking over to place it inside another puppet. This puppet then stands up and the show ends. A massive puppet drops down and extends a hand to P, but he slaps it away, enraging the massive puppet. With the puppet now turning hostile, P must do battle. This is the King of Puppets, the puppet that all the puppets in Krat have been following. After defeating the King of Puppets, the battle is not yet over, as someone emerges from the machine. This is Romeo, and P must defeat him too. After their fight, he thanks P for giving him freedom. If he heads to Adelina's dressing room again, he'll see that she has succumbed to the Petrification Disease. Heading backstage, P finds Geppetto there waiting for him. He says that now the King of Puppets is dead, the lesser puppets in the puppet frenzy will hopefully die down soon, as they're now leaderless. He says that the petrification disease still lingers and tells P that he needs to go to the Grand Exhibition as he's heard rumours that the alchemists there have developed a cure for it. P heads down the charity house path, and he soon comes to the Lorenzini Arcade, a shopping district, and it's populated by carcasses. Taking out these carcasses, P heads through the arcade, which is full of decay and death, and heading through a perilous wine cellar, P comes out at the exit and is outside the Grand Exhibition. P finds a tram and takes a ride to the next platform. Inside the exhibition's gallery, P must fight through many frenzied robots. He meets a survivor, Belle, who mentions people at the Grand Exhibition having taken a drug. She also talks of biological experiments too. Pushing further through the exhibition, P finds vats containing a strange liquid, potentially the drug that Belle was referring to. He is also attacked by strange individuals with guns. A bit further on, after defeating a gargantuan enemy, P comes face to face with Champion Victor, a boxer who had been brought back to life by the Alchemists. This Hercules of Krat is talking of evolution becoming real. Defeating him at first sees him pumped full of the drug, and P defeats him again during his second phase. Before P is able to finish Victor off though, he is finished off by an individual clad head to toe in armour. P then sees the mysterious man who is extracting and collecting Ergo from enemies P had defeated. He applauds P. His name is Simon Manus, and he's the leader of the Alchemists. He tells P that Ergo is a crystallized form of human life essence. Souls, basically, and it being human essence is why it works so well with puppets. He mentions an elixir, the drug that P has been seeing throughout the exhibition and that Belle referred to. He goes on to invite P to a place called the Isle of the Alchemists and witness their triumph for himself. After Simon leaves, P heads for a tram and speaks with the Red Fox and the Black Cat again. Red Fox says they're in a bind. It turns out that Black Cat has the Petrification Disease and is losing his sight. He needs to find gold coin fruit. That gets him from the Alchemists, as they're working for them, but never enough to actually cure him. A way to effectively keep these two in their employ. So P can choose whether or not to help these two tricksters out by giving them some gold coin fruit, or to deny them. Either way, he moves on, and speaking with Vanini, P learns that in order to get to the Isle of Alchemists, their secret island, P will need a special fuel source, a golden Ergo, in order to power a special vehicle that Vanini designed. P gets on the tram. The tram takes him to a place called the Barren Swamp, a former coal mine that is now essentially a dumping ground for discarded and worthless puppets that have outlived their usefulness. And this is where the golden Ergo will be located. He fights various puppets, dodging discarded remnants, and he also meets Alidoro there. He says that he is there as a terrible monster lives on the cliff at the end of the swamp. It behaves like a crow gathering shiny things. Maybe this is where P will find a golden Ergo. Further into the barren swamp, P can come across a human survivor. This is the Owl Doctor, who was the lover of Adelina Corday. He is extremely hostile to P, and after a fight, he is put to rest. Moving on again and making his way through a ravine which is populated by carcasses, P manages to reach the cliffs. He feels the ground shaking and genuinely states that it came from the direction of Krat Central Station. P meets a rookie explorer named Hugo. He mentions Alidoro by name and mentions that he's a fan. He tried to follow Alidoro's tracks but hit a dead end. He speaks of certain rumours about Alidoro, about fraud, theft and assault, but Hugo attributes them to jealousy. Apparently though, Alidoro is wanted. He says that Alidoro saved loads of lives in the workshop tower collapse. He then finds a journal, a sentry's notebook. He was sent out to deal with the monster in the swamp, but didn't realise just how big it actually was, so he reported it. However, his team was denied backup. The sentry mentions that the monster knew that they were there. Entering a clearing, P comes face to face with the aforementioned monster. In line with what the sentry wrote, the monster is huge and grotesque. It's so big because it's been feeding on Ergo from the discarded puppets in the swamp. Its nest is littered with Ergo-depleted puppets. The creature is ferocious, and after a long battle which becomes tougher as it rages on, the green monster of the swamp merges with what could be the now discarded body of the scrapped watchman. P eventually defeats the disgusting creature and retrieves the golden Ergo. Alidoro is there waiting for him. He says that P acted as the perfect bait for him to be able to grab the last hero's weapon. It gives P a nickname, Alidoro's best bait, and Alidoro then returns to Hotel Krat. Anyway, P has a job to do, so he pushes forward and a series of tunnels take him back to where this all started, Krat Central Station. Returning to Vanini with the golden Ergo, he is delighted and says that the Alchemists ordered Vanini to design transportation for them to be powered by the golden Ergo, and that he thinks it will be in their underground base. The problem is that Vanini doesn't actually know where their base is. He tells P that Antonia may know where it is, and he gives him a golden lead acid battery which he can use to power the transportation. Speaking with Antonia, she says that the passage connected to the underground base is actually right underneath the hotel, and it's precisely where Ergo was first discovered. Unfortunately, the passage is locked until someone from their side opens it. Finally, Antonia says that she has heard some of the Alchemists occupy the collapsed tower of the train station. Going to the station, P hears Sophia's voice over the Ergo waves and says that what's happening there at the station is an Ergo amplification effect. Asking him to find out what's happening, he fights his way through the station. In the workshop train where he woke up, P can find a letter written by Simon, addressed to him, telling him that he is able to read someone's memories through the Ergo. He talks of a relic being returned to their sacred place and the doors will now open. He finishes the letter by calling P a good guide. Emerging from the station, carcasses roam the streets of Krat now. P has to fight puppets that have been corrupted too. He then arrives at the collapsed workshop tower. Fighting his way up the tower, defeating various enemies, P makes it to the top and is confronted by the Walker of Illusions. This enemy is tough and creates a duplicate of himself, an illusion. Despite this challenge, P prevails and defeats the Walker of Illusions. Descending in an elevator, it shakes from another earthquake. He hears the voice of Sophia telling him that the hotel is under attack. He also hears the voice of Simon too. He says that Geppetto's lies will be useless in the new world. In order to get back to the hotel as the Stargazer isn't working, P must do battle with the Parade Master again, only this time he's corrupted and he's got friends. Defeating him again, P arrives at the hotel. The place has been ransacked and the mark of the Black Rabbit Brotherhood is clear as day. The Stalkers have kidnapped Geppetto. She says that although the Black Rabbits did it, she senses that this is the work of Simon. Checking on everyone on the second floor, it seems that Geppetto was all that they were after. Antonia, revealing that she had lied beforehand, says that by playing a special chord on the piano, the portrait for the secret passageway will open. Before leaving, Eugenie said that Alidoro disappeared during the attack on the hotel. P then opens up the secret passageway. P is now in the relic of Trismegistus, which may sound like an item but is actually a location. Ergo stalactites hang and protrude from the walls of the cave. Encased inside a mineral known as crowd, P makes his way through it, through the combat grounds and into another large open area where he is confronted once again by the Black Rabbit Brotherhood. After fighting against and kicking the asses of the remaining 3 siblings, a surprise is in store for P. It seems that thanks to the Alchemists, they've resurrected their older brother who is even more powerful than before. But after another tense battle, P defeats the Black Rabbit Brotherhood for good this time. Speaking with Vanini back at the hotel, he says that thanks to the Ergo wavelength decoder that he gave to P, the puppets, as well as being compelled by the Grand Covenant, were communicating with each other via the wavelengths. Vanini is surprised and excited as they were not built with that kind of intelligence. He deciphered one of the wavelengths but found considerable noise in the signal, and this is what he'd heard.
Carlo, I hope you can hear me. The laws of the Grand Covenant bind us. We're his puppets. First law, all puppets must obey the Creator's commands. Law 0, the Creator's name is Geppetto. Giuseppe Geppetto.
Vanini then says that they need to find Geppetto, and with that bombshell, P carries on through the area and comes face to face with Alidoro again, who is cowering in fear. He tells him that the Red Fox and the Black Cat have got Geppetto, and they took a submarine going to the Alchemists' Isle. Asking why he betrayed the hotel, he says that the Alchemists told him they'd help him escape from the city. He talks about someone who is annoying, and he's talking about Eugenie. He then drops a bombshell confession and says that he's not really the famous Alidoro. He's Alidoro's partner. Well, former partner. He killed Alidoro in an argument. We'll go into this a bit later, but this guy is called Parrot. Choosing to either kill or spare Parrot, P moves on and calls up the submarine. Arriving at Alchemist's Isle, he sees Sophia there, and she reveals that the Sophia he's been speaking with at the hotel isn't the real her, nor is this one. It's just a projection. She's actually located at the upper part of the Abbey. She says that she became Simon's tool a long time ago and has endured a lot of pain. Her goal was not for P to save Krat, but to save her. She wants P to grant her freedom, death, in order for her body and her spirit, separated for a long time, to reunite in peace. Moving up the beach, P sees someone else's memories. A young boy being abandoned by his father, and the young boy is being spoken to by a much younger Sophia. He also sees memories of the young boy making friends with another young boy, and the two were training to be stalkers. He sees the young boy, now a young man, trying to plead with a legendary stalker to teach him how to use a sword, but the stalker was annoyed at the young man's annoying persistence. But eventually the young boy died of the Petrification Disease. Moving on up the beach and into some ruins, P defeats the massive door guardian. Making his way through the Arch Abbey, P mows down many carcasses and hostile alchemists. Eventually, having ascended the abbey, P comes face to face with Black Cat. He demands some gold coin fruit, again, or he'll have to fight him. Choosing what to do, P moves on regardless. Having made his way up to the top of the abbey, he comes face to face with Laxasia the Complete, the imposing right hand of Simon Manus. She stands in the way of progress, so a fight ensues. She is unbelievably strong, but nonetheless, after a long battle, P manages to defeat her. With her dead, something happens to the tower behind her. P must hurry. Entering the tower, P finds the real Sophia. True to what she said earlier, she is truly suffering and hooked up to a machine that draws her power. She asks him to save her, and P is now faced with a choice. He can either leave her be, prolonging her suffering, or he can end the suffering for her. Whatever option he chooses, P continues on up the tower, and eventually comes across the Red Fox who is there waiting for him. She basically says that the things that she has done have all been in the pursuit of her brother being able to see again. She says that she doesn't want to fight P, but will do what she needs to do. So, you've guessed it, she asks for a gesture and can choose whether or not to give gold coin fruit. If P does, then she allows him to pass. If not, then the two must face off. After being let through or fighting, P continues on and speaks with Geppetto, who is safe. He speaks of wanting P to grow up in a peaceful world, but he must ask P of one last thing. He says that Simon has gone completely mad and is trying to become a god by using a large amount of Ergo and a relic called the Arm of God. Geppetto wants P to ascend the tower and put an end to Simon's plans. Atop the tower, P approaches Simon. The Ergo has transformed him into a monster. Even with the reality of what he has turned into, he's still awestruck by the magnificence of the Ergo, calling it distilled immortality and the key that opens the door to a world with no lies, only truth, and one that unlocks true evolution. Avoiding his giant Ergo hammer, after he takes enough damage, he laughs and says that this is evolution. He then demonstrates that by discarding his fragile body, and according to him, by grasping the true power of a god. The Ergo attached to him then activates, and he becomes even more powerful, and he is now Simon, the awakened god. He's been upgraded too, and now has an even stronger bag of tricks. Despite this, P eventually bests him in combat. Afterwards, dying Simon asks P what he did for Sophia, but he says being able to read people's minds is a curse, and if it wasn't for Sophia, he wouldn't have been able to bear it. The purity of Sophia's heart was a tonic for his pain, and he used the Ergo to hold her there. After this conversation, and after Simon has been defeated, P has one last thing to do. Using the elevator, P descends and sees Geppetto there. He tells P that they have all the ingredients they need, and he says that he's been dreaming of this moment for a long time. The moment someone would come back to life. He tells P that he can become human again, and this can be done by using a huge supply of Ergo and the relic the Arm of God. Geppetto says that he just needs the final ingredient, P's heart. If he does, then all the trials and tribulations will be over, and he says that to reward P, he will turn him into a real boy. So again, P has a choice. For the game's bad ending, P agrees to give Geppetto his heart. He says that he always believed in P, with him being the greatest puppet he'd ever made. He thanks P, embracing him, and then rips P's heart out of his chest. Opening a box, he places the heart into another puppet, and afterwards, back in Hotel Krat, Geppetto stands outside and is approached by a brand new P. Well, it's not P, it's his son Carlo, who at one point had died from the Petrification Disease, and who P's image was based upon. After the game's end, if P gave his heart to Geppetto, P can check Geppetto's desk and finds a letter. He plans to stabilize Krat by getting the puppet and the Petrification Disease under control. He warns P about being careful with his body as he reacts to Ergo. This is due to the Arm of God. P is told to stay safe inside the hotel. If, on the other hand, P refuses, Geppetto is angry, tells P he's broken his heart, and then says that he's the puppet that will bring his son Carlo back to life. He goes over to the box. Removing his glove, he reveals that his arm has a way of using the power of Ergo. He uses it to control another puppet, which rises out of the box, the Nameless puppet. Controlling the Nameless puppet, he uses it to fight P. Eventually, during the fight, P and the Nameless puppet come together, and P aims a swing, chopping off part of the Nameless puppet's head. Unfortunately, this doesn't weaken him, it strengthens him. Holding his own against a very tough enemy, the Nameless puppet goes to stab P in the heart, but Geppetto, realizing that P's heart is crucial for the resurrection of Carlo, sacrifices himself, and the Nameless puppet kills him. P then thrusts his arm through the Nameless puppet's chest, killing it. For what is considered the best ending, the same thing happens as in the good ending. However, if P has accumulated enough humanity throughout his journey, after the fight and after Geppetto sacrifices himself, P will shed a tear. He's pretty much human at this point. He then, after Geppetto has died, returns to the top of the tower and sees a blue butterfly flying round. If P's humanity is high enough for his hair to have grown and turned grey, he places Sophia's Ergo into a puppet, allowing her to live on, and the credits then roll. Post-credits, a scene takes place. A man in a top hat called Paracelsus sits in a chair aboard a train. He speaks of having an update on the Krat experiment, referring to P as a new type of humanity. The woman he's speaking to says that eternal life can take many forms, and it's revealed that their experiments will continue. Paracelsus mentions that they have other experiments available, other keys, and he mentions one, Dorothy. Back in Krat, a girl wearing red shoes taps her heels together, hinting at a potential sequel set amongst the world of Wizard of Oz. The game then ends. Alright, as mentioned, that's a pretty surface level explanation of what the plot is, so let's dive deeper into Lies of P and look at what is going on underneath the surface of this game. Krat was at one point very different from how we see it in the game. Previously a poor coastal town, old families in Krat were essentially the caretakers and the privileged people who ruled over and owned areas of Krat that had been passed down through the generations of those families. However, with the arrival of the Alchemists and the workshop, their power waned. Krat eventually would become a bustling city with a rich economy and a strong infrastructure, but how did this happen? Well, around 600 years prior to the game's events, an inorganic cluster structure was found after the ground collapsed. Bodies were recovered and people found unknown minerals among the ruins at the bottom of the pit. The minerals were valuable and were named Crowd. The pit was named the Relic of Trismegistus, and the mineral they'd found had components of something called Ergo in it. Ergo was the essence of life, the soul, or at least a manifestation of it, that would leave a human body upon its passing. Normally this substance would ascend, but Ergo would get absorbed by the Crowd and trapped within it, causing it to become crystallized. Centuries later, the Alchemists had arrived in Krat, and they now had discovered that the Relic of Trismegistus was essentially a huge Ergo mine and was very valuable. Hotel Krat was located above this pit, and the hotel would work together with the Alchemists. Krat was using coal as its main power source, but that changed after they discovered that the Ergo could be used as a power source instead. Therefore, the coal mines were shut down and the location around these coal mines would become known as the Barren Swamp. Ergo then became not only the city's primary power source, but their currency too, and it would be supplied by the Alchemists who, I guess by this point, had taken control of the Relic of Trismegistus. Krat soon became a hub of innovation, and this leads us on to the arrival of an alchemist who would alter the fate of Krat forever. This man was the inventor, Giuseppe Geppetto. Giuseppe Geppetto was the leader of the workshop union. The union were skilled craftsmen, essentially. He would join up with the Vanini family, and they would work together to mass manufacture puppets all across Krat. After Ergo was discovered, Geppetto built what would become known as a P-organ, a puppet heart, and this would go on to be used in conjunction with automated puppet bodies. This heart would be central to puppets being powered by Ergo, and the puppets would be able to complete simple daily tasks such as cleaning and even taking up jobs in law enforcement. When they move, puppets tap into the Ergo inside them. Ergo was the miracle that made Krat prosper. The advancement and integration of these automated puppets created an imbalance in society, but the people of Krat still liked that the mundane jobs were being carried out by puppets instead, giving them the freedom to enjoy more things in life. The couple that created the first automated puppet bodies, the Vaninis, had a son named Lorenzini Vanini. The flamboyant and eccentric Vanini would go on to become a famous inventor too, building and running the puppet factory called Vanini Works from the age of 18. He would design a tram system, the new puppet of the future, and also a Vanini company submarine named Pistrus, which ran off of lead-acid batteries. Eventually, after all of these years of innovation, Krat was ready to show off the future of automation, the power of Ergo, to the rest of the world via a showcase at the Grand Exhibition. However, this event would never take place. Before we discover the disaster that struck Krat, let's break down the story of the Alchemists first. The Alchemists are a mysterious faction. These mystics work towards the pursuit of knowledge. Mainly made up of doctors and scientists, their history is a mysterious one too. The founder and leader of the Alchemists was Valentinus Monad, a former archaeologist. He was also the father of Sophia Monad. He was devoted to discovering the secret to eternal life. Their motto, wake up, evolve, ascend. It is their belief that a star came to Earth at some point, pretended to be human, and wanted to grant the people the gift of immortality after having heard their wishes. They would call it an angel. However, the god was torn apart after this gift was not what they had been expecting. However, what that looked like is anyone's guess. It's thought that this god coming to Earth may have been in the form of a meteorite made of crowd, and that meteorite may have been the very first source of Ergo. Awakening this god by finding the arm of God would become one of the Alchemists' foremost goals. As for where they were from, the Alchemists were located at Arch Abbey on the Isle of Alchemists, a foreign land, but how did this group end up in Krat? When the Alchemists first came to Krat, they arrived at a place called Moonlight Town. The town were a community of faithful people. According to a guidebook, the town is the lowest place in the city where pilgrims prepared for their journeys by being lifted up to a cathedral. The cathedral was founded, according to legend, when St. Frangelico met the one-winged angel. The Alchemists actually helped transform the town, and Krat became the booming city we see in the game. And one of the advances in Moonlight Town itself was turning the pulleys into cable cars. The Alchemists would also donate a very large amount of money towards the restoration of the St. Frangelico Cathedral. But this relationship wouldn't last forever, as the Alchemists had been carrying out nefarious deeds in the shadows. Basically, Lorenzini Vanini had noticed that the state of Ergo was getting worse over time. He requested an investigation and report into this by his factory manager. According to that report, the manager considered the degradation in quality too widespread to be a coincidence. He would foresee that the continual decline in the quality of Ergo would inevitably result in a high chance of defects in puppets. He had heard that the Alchemists were responsible for this, as they had been conducting experiments on the Ergo. The Alchemists had many experiments going on. Just as the factory manager had heard, the Alchemists were indeed doing their own experiments on Ergo. Ever since they had discovered it, they had been wringing out the bodies of discarded puppets and had been disposing of them near the old coal mines in the barren swamp. Effectively, the Alchemists had discovered the effects of Ergo spores on humans, and these effects led to the Petrification Disease being discovered. The Alchemists would carry out experiments and would try to make a cure for it, but this only caused the sufferer a painful death and resulted in many what we call carcasses. The Alchemists had also discovered that the puppets that were being powered by the Ergo were developing a sense of ego after a puppet named Camille, a maid puppet, caught a baby as it fell from its crib, and Camille started to understand human language, and this would be repeated in other puppets too. Valentinus had a right-hand man, and this was Simon Manus. After the death of Valentinus, Simon took over and their goals changed. Simon's story is an interesting one too. When he was younger, Simon was experimented on by his father. In his confession, Simon claimed that the one who made him was not a normal human, that his abilities were extraordinary, that he claimed the ability to read minds. He desired to create a world without lies, a world where no one betrays you and there's only truth. He decided to give up becoming human and decided to walk the path of immortality and the truth, and he would become God. The idea that Simon was to become a god was already being documented by his followers. One particular follower was Sister Adriana, who would document the words of Simon in the So Said Pistrus books. He began to tell his followers all about eternal life, about the god that was torn apart and their hope of reviving him. Sister Adriana would fall in love with Simon, and in other writings, Adriana would refer to Simon as the one who will swallow even God. The symbol of the Alchemists would be the Ouroboros, the snake eating its own tail, and this sign represents the cycle of eternity, birth, life, and death. One way the Alchemists would try to bring about evolution was that they would start messing around and experimenting with the arm of God, but this didn't go well at all. Some of the other experiments were documented by the Alchemists. A test subject, 826, upon meeting P, says that he was forced to consume Ergo. He says that they were making him do this in order to read the memories contained within. P can meet this test subject in the Abbey, and then later at Rosa Isabel Street. In line with their experiments on the worsening condition of Ergo, they started using the Black Rabbit Brotherhood to steal bodies so that the Ergo could be extracted from them as well. Hence why the Black Rabbit Brotherhood were wanted for such crimes. But back to Simon. Simon would also learn the power of Sophia Monad's abilities. She was what's known as a listener, an ability that was inherited from her mother Isabel. According to Sophia, Ergo would eventually reach out to her, and it wanted her to know that it was once human, the purified essence of human life, and that life would become trapped inside it due to the Petrification Disease. Due to Ergo being used as a power source in puppets, Sophia would be able to communicate with them via the Ergo and the human essence trapped inside it. As a listener, she could manipulate time by harnessing the power of Ergo, but this didn't end well. This leads us back to Simon. He wanted to utilize Sophia's power, imprisoned her at the Abbey, and hooked her up to a machine, and this is what essentially kicked off the Petrification Disease. But rumors of the Alchemists and their nefarious deeds were beginning to come to light. Slowly but surely, secrets about the Alchemists started to leak. People would leave and rumors would spread that they were in fact planning to unleash a disaster on Krat, a disaster involving Ergo. Simon would build a machine and place it in the Tower of the Abbey, with that machine's purpose being to absorb all the Ergo in Krat, and we see this. As Peeve kills various puppets and enemies in Krat, the Ergo is being collected by Simon's machine, and he uses it to ascend to godhood. In fact, the Abbey being built on that particular island was significant, as it's the most efficient place in the world to study and use Ergo wavelengths. The conniving ways of the Alchemists, though, are best seen through the story of the Archbishop Andreas. After Andreas was appointed priest of the St. Frangelico Cathedral around 30 years before the game takes place, and as mentioned before, he accepted a large donation from the Alchemists in return for land. Over time, the Archbishop would become more and more corrupted, lost to greed. After the Petrification Disease hit Krat, Andreas would consider this an act of God's divine judgment, and he would consider himself to be the saviour of Krat. He worked together with the Atoned, who would help survivors get to the cathedral. After he'd helped distribute a cure for the disease to the sick people developed by the Alchemists, it was discovered that the cure wasn't a cure at all. It made things worse, and the sick would suffer even more. Andreas would then vow revenge on the Alchemists. One of the nuns at the cathedral named Cecile, a murderer, was taken in by the Archbishop, and he had her steal the Arm of God relic, which, as we've already discovered, is a very important relic to the Alchemists. He planned to use the Arm of God in order to heal Krat, but never got round to it, as he ended up mutating into the form that P encounters in the cathedral, lost to his madness, and declaring that he himself is the one-winged angel. Andreas, after being defeated, says that the need for power, wealth, and his greed overtook him. During the game, P repeatedly meets the Red Fox and Black Cat, and Simon had tasked the Red Fox and the Black Cat to follow P so that he could lead them to the Arm of God that the Archbishop Andreas had stolen from the Alchemists. We do need to talk about the Petrification Disease, and we will shortly, but first, let's talk about the Puppet Frenzy. Earlier I mentioned Geppetto, and his invention that is the P organ, the beating heart of Ergo-powered puppet automation. I also mentioned Vanini's parents. Let me introduce you to someone known as Arlecchino. Throughout the game, P can answer public phones, and on the other end is someone who wants P to solve riddles. For this reason, he is known as the King of Riddles. Answering one of his riddles correctly will reward P with a Trinity key, which unlocks secret and mysterious rooms around Krat. It could be that these rooms were meeting places of three of the most important and most powerful people in the city. A secret society, if you will. Anyway, answering all of the riddles, P can meet Arlecchino. Now the problem with Ergo is that it has a human ego attached to it, given that it's the essence of human life, and that's how the puppets in the game have been changing, developing human characteristics. Speaking with what remains of Arlecchino at the Abbey, he gives us some story on his background. One day, Arlecchino's ego was awoken. He understood that he was human. He started to harbour deep hatred for humans and resented how they would trap and imprison people's ergo essence inside puppets. He viewed puppets as equal to humans, not inferior, and he tortured his master, and his master told him where the Alchemists' island was. He became determined to exact his revenge on humans. He'd kill, and he'd enjoy it. He would make up riddles and speak in rhymes in order to distract himself from the urge to kill. Through dialogue, Arlecchino reveals that he'd killed Lorenzini Vanini's parents. He enjoyed killing them the most, not due to their roles in creating automated puppets, but because he hated how happy they were. He would go on to become a serial killer and went to the Alchemist's Isle, which is where P finds him. It's very likely that the ergo placed into Arlecchino's puppet body was a human serial killer prior to their death. Anyway, this news didn't go down well. A puppet killing people. So the crime itself was covered up, with it being revealed that they were the victims of a mugging. Vanini, as a young man, would try and gain access to the official records of the case, but he was always denied, and this was due to the Alchemists and the Workshop Union not wanting the details released. So the puppets had something that would be imprinted on them, which people hoped would prevent this from happening again. This something was called the Grand Covenant, and it was designed to stop the puppets from becoming too human. It was essentially the puppet code, and it followed 4 simple laws. Number 1, all puppets must obey their creator's commands. Number 2, a puppet may not harm humans. Number 3, a puppet protects and serves humans in the city of Krat. And number 4, a puppet cannot lie. But one day, something happened. The Grand Covenant failed. All across Krat, puppets became frenzied and started attacking their masters. No one was safe. The streets were filled with corpses very quickly. The police and the military police didn't help, as they too would become frenzied. The high price of total puppet automation. In conversation with Geppetto, he states that he didn't build every puppet in Krat, so he's not surprised that some of them broke away from the Grand Covenant. But the truth is that good old genius Geppetto was the one who started the puppet frenzy. He had enacted a secret law, something known as Law Zero. Something that he'd built into the Grand Covenant was that the creator's name is Geppetto. He did this for one purpose, to bring back his son Carlo, who had perished as a result of the Petrification Disease. All he needed was a large amount of ergo, and he'd be able to obtain this, well, through humans dying. Therefore, he ordered the puppets to slaughter every living person in the city. This was a great way for Geppetto to distract the Alchemists with something, whilst he did what he needed to do. Remember, as mentioned, he didn't bind every single puppet to the Grand Covenant, so some remained free of his influence. But they would be bound to another. With all the death going on in the city, ergo levels were high, and this resulted in lots and lots of ergo spores. Alright, we've mentioned the Petrification Disease multiple times, so let's unpack what this disease is, and how and why it ravaged Krat. As I mentioned just now, the humans being killed in the puppet frenzy resulted in the rampant spread of the Petrification Disease via ergo spores in the air. It's not really explicitly explained just how long the puppet frenzy has been going on by the time that the game begins, but the fact remains that after ergo was introduced to Krat, some miners who were breathing in ergo spores were getting sick from this mysterious disease. As you'd imagine, and as we've already discussed, this revelation would be eye-opening to the Alchemists, and they would start plotting and experimenting, resulting in the creation of carcasses. The first official outbreak of the Petrification Disease occurred in the Rose Estate. The Monad family, who remember were very wealthy and influential, founded a charity house in order to help poor young children in the city, and it was located in the Malum district. According to the Monad Charity House Guide, children received an education that aligned to their aptitude and career path. They could learn to be a stalker, an alchemist, or a workshop technician, and this is very likely where the Black Rabbit Brotherhood originated from. Anyway, the Petrification Disease ravaged the place and pretty much everyone there was infected. The leader of the Alchemists, Valentinus Monad, was there at the time, and this is how he died, from the Petrification Disease. It's considered that Simon Manus wanted to be the leader of the Alchemists to fulfill his own ambition of godhood, so this was a targeted attack. Symptoms of the disease were a change in the colour of the affected person's blood, and scales or bluish-green crystals would appear on the skin. Organ failure would soon follow after. The disease would eventually turn people to stone, freezing time and memory within the afflicted body. The disease would trap the ergo of that person within the body, and Sophia says she discovered this and used ergo to manipulate time. Witnessing the effects of the Petrification Disease, the Alchemists believed that this disease was a good thing for them, an essential and necessary step in their pursuit of human evolution. so they would continue to experiment with it. The alchemists would make a serum, however this was not necessarily a cure, not in the traditional sense anyway. With this serum, they injected patients who were suffering from the Petrification Disease. One experiment details a test subject, 890. The majority of subjects died, becoming carcasses, but 890 did not. However, this subject did experience various side effects. Test subject 890 was actually someone that we previously mentioned, Sister Adriana. And Sister Adriana would become Laxasia the Complete. She would be described as the first whole being, baptized by the elixir. The only imperfect thing about her was that her feelings for Simon remained. The serum would control the condition, turning humans who were lucky enough, or unlucky enough, to survive the condition into superhuman mutants, essentially. This mutation is seen through champion Victor. Victor was once the world's strongest man, and was even nicknamed the Hercules of Krat. However, at one point in his life, he lost all his strength, and he was dying. He then turned to the alchemists for their help, and people were told that Victor had died. However, the alchemists had actually exposed Victor to the Petrification Disease, and when they cured him of the disease, he became even stronger than he was before he became a mutant. He would then join the alchemists, and he himself also took up a strong belief in evolution, with him as living proof of this remarkable advancement in science, and joined the alchemists' search for immortality. Simon, of course, saw Victor's transformation as potential evolution. The time would then come for the disease to spread across the city like wildfire. Citizens would not receive the serum that the alchemists made. That was until the recipe for the serum was stolen from the alchemists by someone called Dr. Clark Shaw. He had used the recipe to develop the doctor's cure-all, but this wasn't really a cure. Giving it to the people had a terrible outcome, and they would die, or worse, they would become revolting carcasses. The carcasses would then spread all across the city. As mentioned earlier on, refugees were taken in at the cathedral and were helped there by the Atoned, but after they all died, she felt immense guilt for it and would, hence her name, try to atone for what she felt was her fault by taking them to the cathedral, as it was already overrun with carcasses. Unfortunately, the Petrification Disease, the puppet frenzy and carcasses all linked back to Ergo. Because of the integration of Ergo into every part of the city, the Petrification Disease was quite inevitably unavoidable. But let's move on and discuss Stalkers. Alright, so what exactly are Stalkers? Essentially, they are groups of vigilantes that used to be the armed guards for the privileged classes of Krat. However, they aren't exactly on the same page. There are two groups of Stalkers, the Bastards and the Sweepers. The Bastards come from noble families. They were employed as guards for the alchemists in the workshop, and the motto of the Bastards was honour or nothing. Unable to find their meaning amongst the old families, they teamed up with the alchemists, foreseeing a better future for themselves. The Red Fox, Claudia, is an example of a bastard stalker, given that she comes from one of the old houses, the House of Wolf. The Wolf family actually provided the alchemists funding to build their lab, along with the other families, but some of the families wanted to know more information about the labs. The Wolf family helped get rid of construction workers working in the relic of Trismegistus, as it became known just how much the mine and the minerals inside were worth. Anyhow, the other group were known as the Sweepers. The Sweepers come from the alleyways of Krat. They still guard the old families of Krat, serving in line with their motto, "We always repay what is owed." They felt like they'd been left behind after the rapid growth of Krat and its reliance on automation, as well as the alchemists effectively ruling Krat now, instead of the old families. Sweepers would actually be given an important job, and that was to install contraptions known as stargazers all over the city. Stargazers were an invention of the Stalkers, and the biggest stargazer we see in the game is the one in Hotel Krat, and the dials around it move as the player progresses further into the story. The stargazers would also allow the ability to teleport to other active stargazers in the city too. During the outbreak of the Petrification Disease, the stargazers worked well, as they'd absorb ergo spores from the air, creating safe zones in the city. So, residents were safe, but only for a while, as at the time P is contacted by Sophia and awakened, we find that the stargazers have all been destroyed. Another thing about the stargazers is that due to Sophia being kept as a prisoner by Simon and hooked up to that machine, she was in such intense pain that she became mutated. Her soul would split into many fragments, and due to this she would be able to project herself all over Krat as a spectral form. Also due to this happening, she would be able to power various stargazers all over the city, and of course her power could be used by P, as she would draw upon the Ergo to strengthen him. Sophia was using her power to rewind time every time P died, so that he could carry out what she needed him to do. When the puppet frenzy kicked off, the Stalkers were sent out to protect the people of Krat and would battle the puppets, which is why the Stalkers have such a deep burning hatred for the puppets, and often that rage is directed at P. In the game, we encounter a few Stalkers such as the Survivor, the White Lady and the Owl Doctor. The first we meet is the Mad Donkey, one of the sweepers who had been pursuing Geppetto, as he, amongst many other Stalkers, believed that Geppetto was the man who was responsible for the puppet frenzy. But there was one particular event which proved fatal for a lot of Stalkers: the Battle of the Workshop Tower. Now, this was the location where Geppetto and the other skilled craftsmen worked. After arriving at the Workshop Tower, they had arrived to take out any puppets that were intent on attacking and killing people. However, massive shards of crowd would erupt from the ground and would result in the Workshop Tower collapsing. A lot of people died, and the incident would cause so many Stalkers to die that many considered the Stalkers completely wiped out. This tragic incident at the Workshop Tower meant that the small number of Stalkers that did survive either went mad or were emotionally crippled afterwards. Others would turn to crime and extortion to get by, such as the Black Rabbit Brotherhood, who offered to protect surviving humans from the puppets. Well, that was until they could no longer pay. And many would ally themselves with the Alchemists, such as the Black Rabbit Brotherhood, the Red Fox and the Black Cat. There is one particular Stalker who is named the Legendary Stalker, but we'll look at how she is relevant to the story in this next section. So let's now look at the story of Carlo, Geppetto's son. We learn of Carlo's childhood and his formative years by way of the memories that P sees at the Black Beach on the Alchemist's Isle. When Carlo was very young, Geppetto was so consumed by his work that he decided to ship Carlo off to the Monad charity house in the Malum district. Geppetto wouldn't really ever visit Carlo either. Heck, Geppetto didn't even attend Carlo's graduation. One day, Carlo struck up a friendship with another young boy named Romeo, and they both had aspirations of becoming Stalkers, which, as mentioned earlier, was one of the vocations a child at the charity house could choose to work towards. Carlo would also gift Romeo his graduation pendant. Anyway, one day Carlo also met the legendary Stalker and begged her to teach him how to use a sword. This legendary Stalker found Carlo's persistence annoying rather than endearing. Then the outbreak of the Petrification Disease took place at the charity house, and Carlo caught it, as did Romeo. Carlo perished, and the legendary Stalker would return and regret her decision to abandon Carlo. It's not exactly known who this Stalker was, but some theorize her to have been Lady Antonia. After Carlo had died, Geppetto attempted to revive Carlo, but this didn't work at all, and the result of this experiment was the nameless puppet, Carlo's emaciated body, an empty husk that instead of reacting well to the Ergo, had the opposite effect and would likely result in the complete destruction of Carlo's precious Ergo. Geppetto was at a loss. He needed a tremendous amount of Ergo in order to go through the process of reviving Carlo. That wasn't until Romeo, dying from the disease, approached the grieving Geppetto and asked him to turn him into a puppet capable of housing his Ergo inside it. Geppetto agreed, but in return, plotted, and his plan was to force Romeo to lead the puppets in carrying out the puppet frenzy. That way Romeo would be blamed for the puppet frenzy, and not Geppetto. This plan would also have the benefit of denying large amounts of Ergo to Simon and the Alchemists. Geppetto then executed Law Zero for the puppets to obey their creator, and Romeo then commanded the puppets to kill humans so Geppetto could start harvesting Ergo. After he was transformed into a puppet and carried out the puppet frenzy, Romeo gradually regained his memories, realized what he was doing, broke away and became the king of puppets we see in the game. He then led the puppets in their revolt against Geppetto, the Alchemists, and the Petrification Disease and carcasses. His best puppets, his elites, were of course the Parade Master, the Scrapped Watchman and Fuoco. The latter's job was to guard the flames of the Vanini Works puppet factory. Descartes' note mentions that Fuoco started to obey something other than humans, almost as if he developed faith in some god. Fuoco then, hearing Romeo's words over the Ergo waves, took control of the factory, instead using the factory to produce more puppets for Romeo's revolt. This god was the king of puppets, and the king of puppets was controlling puppets all across the city of Krat. Romeo's revolt explains why Romeo held out his hand to P, as he didn't want to fight him, as Romeo had learned that P had Carlo's Ergo within him. This is why Romeo put on a show at the opera house, to give P a hint as to what Geppetto is up to. It's why P apparently looks ill when he learns of the origin of the necklace he obtained by defeating Romeo. It's because it's the necklace that Carlo gave to Romeo. The Ergo, the humanity inside P that belonged to Carlo, vaguely remembers. This links into something that Sophia says when she states that Ergo contains the memories and distilled lifespan of the victim. We learn from a message from Romeo to P, Carlo, that he had tried to reach out to him many times.
Carlo, I'm Romeo. We grew up together in the Monad charity house. Remember? We're best friends. I'm doing what I can to fend off both the Petrification Disease and the Alchemists. That's why I tried sending you messengers. But you got rid of them all. You're still an unstoppable fellow. I remember you. No reason for us to fight, I suppose. I'm Romeo. We grew up together in the Romeo.
These messengers that P kept destroying were the bosses that he'd fought and killed. This is why, during those fights, they appear to be saying things to P, but he cannot understand them, as at this point, he doesn't yet have Fanini's Ergo wavelength decoder. But as Romeo defied Geppetto, he would then create the body of P, which was to keep the Ergo of Carlo within it. So the overarching narrative of this title focuses on P and his humanity. The P organ in P's chest was imbued with Carlo's Ergo. Geppetto's idea was that P would gather all the Ergo he needed, and slowly Carlo's ego would awaken. After activating the puppet frenzy, Geppetto had placed P inside a train car in the Krat Central Station. He would need to go there to activate P in order for him to fight all that opposed him, including Simon and the Alchemists and the puppets under the control of Romeo, and this would help him achieve his goals. Geppetto thought that he would get away with starting the puppet frenzy, but some humans alive still in the city suspected that he was responsible, and one of these people was of course the Mad Donkey, who had chased Geppetto across the city of Krat, and therefore Geppetto wasn't able to reach P at the station. This is when Sophia sent a blue butterfly to awaken P, and he made his way to Hotel Krat. Approaching Hotel Krat, P is confronted with a choice. In order to gain entry, he must lie and say that he's a human, and then, as we know, P kills the Mad Donkey and rescues Geppetto. Throughout the entire game, as mentioned in my rundown of the plot, P is confronted with a number of important choices in the game, which not only change the fate of certain NPCs, but that also alter the journey that P goes on. These include decisions in relation to such questions asked by the Atoned, by the fake Alidoro, Julian the Gentleman, and many more. After these moments, if P tells the truth, as he is programmed to do due to the Grand Covenant, nothing changes. But if he lies, he taps into what is a human trait, and this is essentially what Geppetto was hoping for, as, of course, he wanted to take the P organ from P and insert it into the nameless puppet. P can also listen to music, and this would change him too. As a result, strange things start to happen to him, such as his heart pounding and feeling a warmth, and this results in him becoming more human, something that Sophia comments on when she sees him in Hotel Krat. She becomes confused as to how P could go beyond the limits of a puppet, but lying was changing him. Other things happen, such as P's hair not only growing but turning grey too, and this is a result of Carlo's ego awakening inside him. And this is also seen through Polendina, Antonia's butler. Over time, as his Ergo changed and he developed an ego, he actually fell in love with Antonia. Partway through the game, it's revealed that Antonia is very sick with the Petrification Disease, and eventually scales appear on her face. Upon meeting Giangio at the cathedral and then at City Hall, P can obtain a cure for Antonia by giving Giangio the gold coin fruit. And then Polendina asks if it's possible for a puppet to love a human. Another choice for P, in order to grow his humanity, is whether or not to actually give the cure for Antonia to Polendina. If he does, then Polendina will give the cure to her. It's not actually a cure for Antonia though, it more so relieves the pain that she's in, and she's able to pass on peacefully and painlessly. Another unresolved thread in this video that we need to sort out is Giangio. We first meet him outside the St. Frangelico Cathedral. He's slightly terrified at first, pleading with P to not kill him, with him thinking that P is part of something called the Organization. He talks of the gold coin fruit and that he's been in pursuit of it as he's caught the Petrification Disease and needs to make a cure. The second time we meet him, when leaving City Hall and heading back into Hotel Krat, he says that when he tried to pick the gold coin fruit off the tree, it burned his hand. He He thought this was because of his being infected with the Petrification Disease. The gold coin trees were also said to blossom when plague stalks the land. Truth is that according to Vanini's landmark guide, the hotel is one of Krat's most creepy and haunted buildings. It was initially a castle which was built by an aristocrat occultist and was centered around a glowing and radiant tree, the gold coin tree. The castle was then destroyed in a fire. The castle was then renovated in the Belle Epoque style, and its legend only enhanced its appeal, and the hotel would receive great reviews from guests. In terms of the gold coin tree, Sophia has a different explanation of how trees came to be.
But the alchemists have tainted everything. The gold coin tree is a pathetic creature they created from the listeners. Like many of their creations, it's tragic, but useful. You can control Ergo with gold coin fruits. The sad tears of those who became trees. If they get the chance, the alchemists might force me to make such a tree for them. Or something even more tragic.
But back to Giangio. Remember I mentioned that Simon was Valentinus' right-hand man? Well, Valentinus actually had another one too. His name was Philippus Paracelsus. Giangio is Paracelsus. In that first meeting by the cathedral, he almost lets slip that he's an alchemist. What's more, the man at the end of the game on the train is Paracelsus. Yep, this is the man we've been seeing as the scared, stuttering Giangio. So what's good old Paracelsus been up to? Well, we found out in the game that Paracelsus, we'll call him that from here on out, was trying to make a cure for the Petrification Disease, or so we were led to believe. He's, like the other alchemists, in pursuit of the secret to eternal life. Such is his devotion to it that he has a special weapon calling it the Ouroboros Eye. It's not clear when he joined the Alchemists, but he was the one who gifted them the Arm of God. It's possible that he infiltrated them whilst working for this other organization. As for the gold coin fruit tree, it's possible that the gold coin tree had some sort of divine power that could actually sense the ill intentions of Paracelsus, which is why he needed P to pick it for him, offering him wares in exchange for it. In his conversation with the woman on the phone, he talks about P becoming a brother. I guess the experiment in Krat was a success, as eternal life was found through the Ergo and allowed puppets to live as the Ergo once was, with human essence inside it, which means that Paracelsus has been watching and observing P's journey throughout his adventures in Krat. He mentions that he's found a potential path to eternal life. The Arm of God, of course, is the key to this. Also, in his final conversation on the train, he talks about having another plan, a key, and that of course involves the girl we see with the red shoes, Dorothy. As for where he's from, well, we don't really know. He joined the Alchemists at some point, sure, and it's not known how old he is, but one thing to note is that Paracelsus was a real-life figure, a doctor from the German Renaissance period. This Paracelsus was so renowned that he had a fairy tale written that was inspired by him called The Legend of Paracelsus. In it, Paracelsus is seeking the cure for various human illnesses and ailments and discovers a tree with a spirit trapped inside it. This could be what the gold coin fruit tree is. After the creation of the elixir, which resulted in the transformation of Sister Adriana into Laxasia the Complete, Paracelsus saw this as a massive step towards the evolution that his organization was striving for. But we're likely going to have to wait to find out more, either for the upcoming DLC to confirm more about Paracelsus, or for a sequel to, as it seems that Paracelsus and his order are key to the narrative and the experiments they are trying to carry out. So finally, throughout the story we've been hearing all these things about Alidoro that don't really line up with the Alidoro we see in the game. He's almost like a completely different person. Alidoro used to be an alchemist, but he grew disillusioned with what the devious alchemists were plotting and planning from the shadows, and he would later join the sweepers and become a stalker. He approached a reporter named Medoro, and Medoro published an article, which the alchemists acted upon by having Medoro suspended and the article banned. Alidoro was then essentially on the run because of what he knew. When the puppet frenzy began, Alidoro was watching the workshop tower when it collapsed. He saved Eugenie, the weaponsmith who worked there, took her to Medoro, who was also a medic, and Alidoro lost a finger in the incident. Eugenie would then come to idolize Alidoro for saving her life, which is why she was so excited and thankful that P saved him and that he was able to seek refuge at the hotel. Alidoro was a treasure hunter, but one that wanted to preserve items and not make money through them. Anyway, Alidoro had a companion, a partner called Parrot. Parrot wanted to make some money, and although he looked up to Alidoro, he resented his outlook. So Parrot sold some items and Alidoro was furious. This ended up in a violent confrontation in which Parrot killed Alidoro. Parrot then assumed the identity of Alidoro but would get into trouble, hence the wanted poster and him basically destroying Alidoro's reputation, meaning that the Alidoro we see is not the real Alidoro, it's Parrot. One clue to this was that when P gave fake Alidoro the gloves that Eugenie had made for him, they didn't fit and he called them a mess. Parrot also took a decrypted letter from Alidoro meant for his sister. After Vanini deciphers it, it seems that Eugenie is actually Alidoro's sister. This lines up with a remark from Parrot that the real Alidoro came from the country of the morning, as well as Eugenie, and this is why he was watching the workshop tower. He was trying to watch over his sister from afar. He couldn't introduce himself to her until the alchemists were gone from Krat. And that's pretty much it for the stories of Lies of P, so far at least, as we still have a DLC to come. One thing that is strange was that on the Pilgrim's Path, there is a golden stargazer. I'd imagine that this may play a part in the DLC, but we'll have to wait and see. If you enjoyed this video, then please leave a like and subscribe if you are not already. Leave a comment down below with your thoughts, but for now, take care, and I'll see you in the next one.